Caregiving Club on air. This podcast is dedicated to the millions of family caregivers who want wellness tips and self-care solutions, who seek expert advice, and who want news about healthy aging and how to create well home design in our forever homes. I'm Sherri Snelling, a corporate gerontologist, author, and educator, a TV interviewer, host, and news commentator. I'm joining you from Southern California, where our interviews and news take us all across the country to explore the many ways to help you on your caregiving journey and to lift you up here at Caregiving Club on air. Welcome to Caregiving Club on air. I'm your host, Sherri Snelling, and we have a wonderful May episode planned for you with lots of really great information, but most importantly, two really terrific interviews that I have. The first is with Harry Margolis, who is one of the nation's top elder law attorneys. You're going to hear more from Harry about why elder law attorneys are so important, specifically for families and caregivers who are caring for an older adult. And we're going to dive into things like the Gene Hackman case and Jay Leno and his wife, Mavis, who has dementia, and all kinds of other things. So that's going to be a fantastic interview. But then we have also Linda Kafka, who is the founder and head and principal of the Neuro Design Academy. And this is something that I am so passionate about because this is the next evolution, if you will, in how we design our homes, how we design our office buildings, how we design our communities. But we're going to specifically focus on the home with Linda. And it's beyond now safety and accessibility of universal design. It's neuro design. She's going to explain what that means, what the science is behind that, and what are some of the trends that we're seeing. And then for Caregiver Wellness News, we're going to focus on Older Americans Month and a wonderful campaign that I actually got involved in with Your Care called No Fear. We're going to tell you all about that. We're also going to focus on May as Mental Health Awareness Month, and we've got some really interesting studies, but also campaigns from the Caregiver Action Network on PTSD and caregiving, and a few other things to share with you. And then in Well Home Design, because it is also May National Home Modification Month and also National Moving Month, I've got some really terrific resources that I want to share with you. And then we have our bonus, which is our pop culture part of our episodes. We're bringing that back for May because there are so many documentaries and films out there right now that are focused on caregiving. We're going to tell you all about those. So with that, let's dive right into our Caregiver Wellness News. So we have so much good stuff for this May episode. I'm going to try to make the news. I'm going to go through just some really highlights for you and do it pretty quickly because I want to get to these great interviews with Harry Margolis and also Linda Kafka. But I did want to just do a shout out and highlight that May is Older Americans Month. And the theme for this year's celebration of older Americans is Flip the Script. So I was involved in a really fun and innovative campaign that I worked on as a gerontologist and consultant for TheoraCare. And FYI, Steve Popovich, who is the founder CEO of TheoraCare, and also Dolores Stone, who was one of their customers whose husband wandered. You may remember that. He had Alzheimer's, but he was wearing their smartwatch, and they were able, with the help of police, to find him really quickly and really easily. I'll have links to both of those episodes, which were, I think, last year. But what we worked on is, there's this discussion in the aging circles that I work in about ageism, as if we don't have enough isms, right? So ageism is something where you have a bias or a prejudice or misperceptions about older Americans. And there's a real strong movement to help overcome that both in the workplace, but also in health discrepancies and just other issues in our society. So by flipping the script, what we want to do is focus more on not, what we call the D words, right? Decay, decline, disease, disability, dementia. Those are the things that we associate, I think, as we get older, particularly as we start getting into our 70s and 80s and 90s. And yet, what we do know from all of the science and all the research is that older adults, well into their hundreds, can thrive, can find joy, can find purpose and passion, and still be a valuable part of society. And so, one of the things I wanted to share with you, and this is why my role with this campaign really helped, I think, to shape how we look at some of the messaging out there, is we're focused so much on the frailties and the vulnerabilities of older adults, what they can't do anymore. And there's this reinforcement, and whether it's in advertising or product messaging or services that are being delivered, it's all about kind of that negative, again, looking at a decline and things are going downhill for you, rather than more of this side of aging that we know is there despite any kind of physical limitations, and quite often despite certain cognitive limitations, because we know that people with dementia still experience joy. So this whole psychology of positivity is a big part of what gerontologists are all about. It's a big part of our training and our education. And so I really kind of brought that into the campaign. And you'll learn more about it. I'm not going to share all the details, but what we came up with is a campaign called No Fear. And, there's kind of these twin fears, right, as we get older. One is falling, because we know how deadly falls can be, particularly for our older adults. The other one is, if you do happen to develop dementia, you want to maintain your independence and, your quality of life as long as possible. But there are issues such as wandering. Wandering is a huge issue, and that was what Dolores Stone's story was all about with her husband. And so how do you maintain your freedom and your independence despite, some of those challenges? And so this No Fear is focused on how do you go above and beyond. And what I really love is it taps into the kind of the no fear 60s surf culture, when a lot of our older adults were younger adults. They remember living with no fear, being fearless, but also, recent movies like Thelma, which I just find to be delightful and a wonderful treatment of older adults, because it doesn't talk down to older adults. It doesn't laugh at them. It doesn't, put the myths out there about aging. It's a realistic view, so it's not gaslighting. It's not saying, "Oh yeah, it's all great, it's all easy," but it's also saying, "Listen, again, older adults, they seek adventure. They're curious. They have passions. They have purpose." And so I think you're going to find this campaign really fun. It's going to launch on May 13th for Older Americans Month, to flip the script. And you can join in by sharing your videos. How do you live with no fear, no matter your ages? Because we're all aging, right? We're all going to be part of Older Americans. So share with us your stories, like some of the videos and the storytelling we're going to be doing. But I just had a lot of fun with this campaign. I just want to do a shout out to TheoraCare and thank them for involving me, and also for having No Fear as a startup company who's willing to look at older adults in a different way and not just be part of the noise out there about how old age is, a negative experience, when we know it's really not. I also wanted to just highlight that May, of course, is also Mental Health Awareness Month. And, when we talk about happiness, we know, for instance, with older adults, that our peak levels of happiness happen in our 70s and 80s, not in our 20s, not in our 30s, not in our 40s, 50s, or 60s. It's in our 70s and 80s that we're happiest. And so when we think about happiness, one of the things that I did after I got my master's in gerontology, I also went back to do some courses at Harvard University. So I got my master's certification in happiness psychology, which was taught by the wonderful professor and author, Dr. Arthur Brooks, who wrote his book with Oprah recently that came out. But he had a guest lecture, and it was Jean Quenge. I think I'm saying her name right. She's a professor of psychology at San Diego State University. She's the nation's really the foremost researcher on the societal impact of social media, particularly on our teenage population. And it's a lot of the negative things that we're seeing now related to health, both physical and mental health issues, and also things that carry into our adulthood. And as you guys know, this is the mantra of my book, Me Time Monday, right? I am all about the fact that you've got to find balance in life. You've got to untether yourself from these social media addictions, the doom scrolling, the comparison. We've got all kinds of technical names for it about how we compare ourselves to others, and then that leads to depression. The time that we spend when we could be spending time with family and with friends and having more in-person interaction. So, I know a lot of people love social media, and even I get it all the time. People say to me, "Oh, you got to be out there more. You got to get on TikTok," which I'm not. I finally did get on Instagram because I had so many people just saying, "Aren't you on Instagram?" But, to be honest with you, and I get it. I have to do it for my business. I have to do it for, kind of who I am, getting my name out there and hoping to share then good information with you guys, which is kind of my mission. I know you have to be on social media to reach a lot of people, but at the same time, spending all the time on it drives me completely bonkers. I will just tell you, it is the hardest thing for me to do. It's like the biggest. I have to talk myself into it. I have to, the only way I can get into it is when I create kind of some really interesting videos, like I've been sharing with you guys the self-care in 7 minutes videos. Okay, I love that. I love doing some of the news and, shout outs to some of my colleagues and others, and you'll hear a little bit about it in this episode. But just being out there and it's a lot. So I'm not the best social media person. I'll just go ahead and admit that, because I'm doing too many other things that bring me joy. But it's just a message to you guys, and particularly to family caregivers to not compare yourself to other caregivers, not compare yourself to other people's lives who aren't caregiving. Take this time to spend the time with your loved one and to be present and just disconnect. We've all got to find that balance, because that's what's going to bring us the best health, happiness, and particularly mental health. The other, I want to just do a shout out to a couple of resources. So there is a nonprofit called Help Guide. It's helpguide.org. We're going to have a link on our episode guide page to them. It was created by parents of a young woman who unfortunately, committed suicide at age 29. And they were very dismayed because she seemed to be happy and she seemed to be very involved in life. And this just kind of suddenly happened. And I know that happens to so many families out there. We don't know what the internal sufferings and pain and other issues are, no matter what our age, because we do know, again, even as we get older, we can also still have suicidal ideation, although it seems to lessen because, again, as I said, we get happier as we get older. But it's just a warning sign that we have to read the signs with our friends, with our loved ones. We have to be present. We have to understand what's going on. And it's not a criticism, because, again, you can be very involved and still not know what's happening with someone. But I did want to let you know that helpguide.org, the parents turned their pain around, as so many people do, and created this nonprofit. Wonderful, wonderful resources. Lots of really great checklists, lots of good articles that you can read. Lots of really good things that can help you, both if you have a loved one with mental health issues, but also for aging parents. So they've got really great resources on there for family caregivers of older adults. So check that out. The other thing is just another shout out to the National Suicide Helpline, which is 988. I know most of us now know that that's available, but it's only really been around now for 2 or 3, I think 3 or 4 years. So just be aware, if you're suffering, if you feel you're having a crisis, if you feel like you're all alone and there's no one to talk to, there is. And 988 is your number. Call 988 and talk to someone and get the help that you need. I also want to do a shout out to the Caregiver Action Network, our friends in Washington, D.C., national nonprofit organization for caregiving that's been around, yikes, I think it's at least 25 years. They can correct me, but it's been a long time. They were one of the early ones out there. They have a guide for caregivers of those with PTSD, and May is also when we focus on post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, we often think about that being associated with our war fighters, our military veterans, our first responders, law enforcement, fire department. But, there's a lot of other issues. Like a lot of people said they suffered PTSD during the pandemic. So you don't necessarily have to be, in a heroic role or career to suffer from PTSD. And so they have a great, it's a campaign, but it's also some really great tips and guidelines for caregivers of those loved ones who have PTSD. So you can check that out. And then I mentioned the self-care in 7 minutes videos that I'm really loving doing. I release those every Monday. All of it's taken from my book, Me Time Monday, all the tips that I do. And I just take little excerpts and turn them into little videos for you guys. And I did one this past week because May 4th was Star Wars Day. And if you're a geekhead like me about Star Wars, I love pop culture, as you probably know. And so Star Wars is, just one of those seminal movies for me. And I did one called The Wisdom of Yoda for Caregivers. And here's what's really interesting. I'm obviously not the only gearhead out there who's a Star Wars fan, because I had the most responses on LinkedIn that I've had in I don't know how long. And, it wasn't just people saying, yeah, I love Yoda too. I actually got this fantastic response I wanted to just share with you. Dr. Brian Allman and Dr. Fileti, I hope I'm saying that right. They reached out, Dr. Brian did actually reached out and said, love the video. These kinds of things are so helpful. And they told me about an app that they developed called Enlighten.me. So it's NLIGHTN.me. So Enlighten.me app. It's a stress relief, self-care, and wellness app. But it's based on positive childhood experiences that help you to build resilience over your entire life. Now, I am fascinated by this. I had not heard of PCEs, positive childhood experiences. And the science behind it, is I did a little research, is that there's 7 childhood experiences that help us gain that resilience that we need, particularly for teenagers who are often, so unsure of who they are and what they want to do and their role in life and all the, the bullying and all the other stuff that goes on, right? And we carry that throughout life. So if you can build your resilience early, then you can keep that up, and it helps you into your adulthood years when a lot of life challenges really come your way. Anyway, I'm going to see if we can have him on the podcast. Dr. Brian, I think, would be great. And I want him to explain this more because I'm fascinated by it. But I do believe that, as a gerontologist, as I mentioned to you guys, we study everything from the womb to the tomb. So we are looking for those secrets, those tips, those things that can happen in our very earliest, years. As we're children, as we're, forming our brains. As we know, our brains do not fully form until our late 20s. So what are the things we need to think about that are then going to give us the strength and the foundation to build upon as we age, that again will make us healthier and happier? So we're going to see if we can bring Dr. Allman onto the podcast. But in the meantime, I'm going to have a link to their app. You may want to check it out because it looks really cool. So I just wanted to share that with you. And so we're going to go into now our first interview, which is with Harry Margolis. And I do a little intro up front on Harry, but he is one of the nation's top elder law attorneys. And you may be saying to yourself, elder law attorney, haven't really heard of that before. Well, he's going to tell us what's the difference between an elder law attorney and a general estate attorney, and why are they so valuable to families and particularly family caregivers. But he's also going to tell us about how elder law attorneys can help families save a lot on care costs and long-term care costs. He's going to tell you what legal documents you need to make sure your older loved ones have in place, and that you should think about for yourself. He's also going to tell us about some little nuances out there, some laws that are on the books, like, are you going to be responsible for caring for or paying for your loved ones, your older loved ones' long-term care costs or their debt? Let's say if they were in a nursing home, even if you're estranged, even if you don't talk to them, you've had no relationship for years, He's going to tell us a little bit about that. We're also going to dive into some celebrity cases. Jay Leno, whose wife Mavis has dementia, and he recently had to go and get custodianship. He's going to tell us about that. We're also going to go back to the Gene Hackman case because that one's so fascinating. We're going to say, okay, what are the clues for caregivers that we need to take away from these? So that's going to be a really great interview, and I don't want to delay it any longer. Here it is, my interview with Harry Margolis. So I am so excited to have my next guest on this episode because I have wanted to talk to Harry Margolis, who is an elder law attorney for a long time. And I just want to read to you his background because it's so impressive. And I wanted to set the groundwork for what we're going to talk about. But, Harry has been an elder law attorney and is one of the principals of Margolis and D'Agostino. I'm sorry, am I getting that right? Margolis, Bloom, and D'Agostino. Margolis, Bloom, and D'Agostino.
Don't want to leave out Bloom.
No, let's not leave out Bloom. And you've been, in this field, obviously, for, since the late 80s. You're a fellow of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, which we're going to touch upon. And you were also named a super lawyer in 2005 and in 2015. Best Lawyers named him Best Lawyer in America in the practice of elder law, and you were the only elder law attorney to receive those honors. You also have a podcast called Ask Harry, and we're going to have links to that on our episode guide page. And you have a book called Get Your Ducks in Row, which is really a guide for families and family caregivers, so you can read more about Harry's wisdom. But Harry, welcome to Caregiving Club on Air.
Thanks for having me on, Sherri.
Yeah, well, this is such an exciting, as I mentioned, such an exciting interview because I think the whole legal, side of caregiving is something we kind of overlook, we don't think about. And so, first of all, though, let's ask you, as we ask all our guests, where are we talking to you from today?
So I'm actually in my home in Brookline, Massachusetts, which is a very close-in suburb of Boston. And our office is in Wellesley, Massachusetts, which is also a suburb of Boston, just a little further out.
Love that Boston area. One of my favorites. So, Harry, I want to launch into it, and I want to just start. Let's kind of, lay the table here, if we will, on what is an elder law attorney, and why is that specialty so important for families to know about in kind of navigating all the intricacies of estate law and other things.
So, if you think of some Venn diagrams, so you have estate planning. And then you have the circle of estate planning, you have the circle of elder law. For the most part, they overlap. So elder law attorneys are going to do basic estate planning, wills, trusts, powers of attorney, healthcare proxies. I think there are two areas where they're different. And the first is they're going to be more focused on capacity or the potential incapacity. So they're going to be more focused on getting your healthcare proxy, healthcare directive, your durable power of attorney, and I think revocable trust in place. Over time, I've become much more a proponent of revocable trust as part of planning for incapacity. But then the other thing is in the United States, as you know, you basically pay your own way for long-term care until you run out of money and you qualify for Medicaid. And so the rules for qualifying are extremely complicated, and there's a possibility of saving some assets, whether for yourself, your spouse, your kids, and all that asset preservation is a part of elder law. And that's something that elder law attorneys do and traditional estate planners don't do.
Well, and I've talked to family caregivers and others before, and there's some instances even where an elder law attorney can wind up saving you even hundreds of thousands of dollars if you plan ahead. And because a lot of those laws do change, you mentioned Medicaid, we know that's a state-run program, even though it's federally funded. So the laws change state by state. One question about that is, if you're a family caregiver like me, I'm in California, but let's say my parents are in Florida, do I need to find an elder law attorney in Florida? Or
yes.
Okay. That would be your recommendation?
Basically from just what you said. So Medicaid is a joint federal-state program, and the federal government sets the kind of ground rules, and the states have to fit within those ground rules to get reimbursement from about half of their costs up to, I think, about 80% in some states from the federal government. And but there's a lot of leeway within those. And then they can have some kind. You probably heard of Medicaid expansion as part of the Affordable Care Act, but there's also different and that's making different people eligible for Medicaid. But there are also different kinds of benefits. So states have the options of taking advantage of various kinds of waivers to expand Medicaid coverage for home health and assisted living, and those differ greatly from state to state. So I have no idea even what's going on in Rhode Island or New Hampshire. So you really need to talk to somebody who's local.
Right. And, obviously you get a special credential or special training in this whole area of elder law, which is why it kind of sets you, above and beyond. And is that mostly through the National Academy for Elder Law Attorneys? Is that where
So
that
well, I
comes
got
from?
into this on the ground floor, so there's no way to get training except
Just do it, right?
yeah, on the job. So mostly on the job training, and there was an annual course already when I got started 40 years ago or so, that the Massachusetts Continuing Legal Education did. A couple lawyers who were pioneers in the field. But now the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, which is the kind of national trade group for the organization, does have a certification program. So you can do that. There are a couple of schools that actually have masters in law, in elder law. In Massachusetts, there's New England School of Law. No, sorry. So let's take that back. I think it's the Western Massachusetts School of Law has an online program which people can take nationwide. But then but most of it, to be honest, is still kind of on-job training and taking CLEs to learn the law.
You do want to make sure that if you're talking to an attorney, they really are well-versed in a lot of these things so that you don't overlook something. I find it kind of fascinating because I think because we've got this growing older population, financial planners now are getting certain certifications in, financial planning for longevity and interior designers. I just talked to someone the other day. They're starting to hire gerontologists as part of their team for interior design. So it's kind of fascinating. Yeah, it is a good thing. So I want to ask you, what would be maybe the checklist for family caregivers to know about in terms of the types of legal documents that should be in place, both for yourself but also for your older loved ones? What do they need to make sure is there?
Well, they're really pretty much the standard estate planning documents. I mean, you should have a will, which really takes care of things after you're gone, which matters less for elder care issues than the other documents, but you should have one. But more important in terms of care are your durable power of attorney, which names your agent, the person you pick to make financial and legal decisions for you, a healthcare directive to name an agent to make healthcare decisions, and both click in when you become incapacitated. So you can still live your life and do everything you want until that happens. And then when that happens, there's somebody in place who can step in. The healthcare, different states have different kind of practices with healthcare directives. So it may be a healthcare proxy, it may be a healthcare durable power of attorney, which appoints the agent. But then you also may want to add a medical directive, which gives the agent some guidance. So if you're in a coma, a vegetative state, or at some point you don't want, you have dementia, and you might want to be kept comfortable, but don't use extraordinary methods to keep you alive. You need to communicate that with your agent. And so you can have a medical directive, which can be more or less detailed in what choices you would want. And then
can I just ask you, is that medical directive, would that also be considered a living will? Is that another name for it?
Living will was kind of the early form of medical directive. So living will basically just said, if I'm in a coma or vegetative state, I don't want life support. But you can be more expansive in a medical directive, and it's hard though, because it's you don't know what this future is going to be, right? So you can't detail every circumstance. There are also some workbooks that are available online that do walk people through a lot of different situations and can provide more guidance to their healthcare agent.
Which is really, I mean, again, there's so many nuances to this. I think we get a little overwhelmed once we're thrust into it, particularly if it's a crisis situation, knowing
Right.
that all these things we have to know about. One question I had about all of this is that, I know that a lot of family caregivers ask the question, like, can I get paid to care
Hmm.
for my loved one? Or what if I take a leave of absence from my job? I'm going to give up my salary and my
Yeah.
benefits. When my loved one passes, can I then kind of recoup those losses out of the estate? Talk to us a little bit about some of those minefields that happen.
So there are a few things. So yes, you can get paid, but you need really transparency is, I think, the most important thing, because very often people, I mean, a parent has a stroke, has a fall, and a child jumps in and does what they need to do to take care of them. And that may mean a leave of absence from work. It may mean moving across country and giving up everything. And they might have done it without a whole lot of forethought. Just it's an emergency, and they're going to step in. And it may be after they've been doing this for a while, they say, "Geez, I made a huge sacrifice. I ought to be compensated." And if they don't talk to other family members, usually their siblings, about it, it can create a lot of problems. Because, I mean, how do they get paid? Do they start getting paid while their parent is alive? Is that going to look like some undue influence on them, or coercion to start paying them? Are they going to get paid after they die? Is that in the estate plan, or are they making a claim against the estate? Um, these are all issues, and it's very complicated. And if there's a full discussion, there may be disagreements, but hopefully you can come to some agreement on what's right. I mean, one of the biggest disagreements, or places where there can be, is when there's a disagreement over care. I mean, son or daughter moves in with mom or dad and starts providing all this care, and then mom or dad gives them the house, which might be fair, but the other kids might say, "Well, why didn't they just move to assisted living? My sister didn't have to make that huge sacrifice. That was her choice." And so then it can be problematic. So transparency is important. And then also getting back to the Medicaid issue. So you're under the Medicaid rules, you're not allowed to give away assets. So if you give away assets, that'll make you ineligible for Medicaid coverage for the next 5 years potentially. But you're allowed to pay for things. So that's the reason why, if you're going to have some sort of payment, it ought to be under a written contract, because then it's enforceable. It's clear what it's for. It's not a gift, it's payment. And the other part of that is, if you're getting paid for services, then you do need to report it on your income tax return and pay taxes on it and pay your Social Security on it. And that also makes it look more legitimate for everybody, because it's not a gift. It's for compensation for services rendered, and everything, except for the fact that you got to pay taxes, everything works a lot better.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think that we just assume that these things are okay, and then it really, we have to have it documented, right, from a legal
I
perspective.
think documented and talked about.
And talked about, yeah, for sure. That is kind of one of the things that's been in the news lately, and I've had emails from folks who listen to the podcast saying, "Hey, talk about this." But we've had two kind of celebrity, if you will, celebrity situations. One I want to start with, which is Jay Leno, who is the former late night talk show host and comedian. His wife Mavis has advanced dementia, and he
Mhm.
recently had to go to the courts and get custodianship. And I know people have heard those words with Britney Spears and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about what is that, and why is that important, particularly maybe with someone with dementia, because you figure he's the husband, he would make the decisions if she
Mhm.
can't, right?
Right. So for the most part, spouses have no more rights to make decisions for their spouses than anybody off the street. Everybody's an independent person. They make their own decisions. There are some states do have sort of automatic healthcare agents, based on relationship, just to make healthcare decisions. But I think most don't. I know my state of Massachusetts doesn't. So so if you don't have a healthcare proxy in place and someone has to make healthcare decisions, then you have to go to court and get either conservatorship or guardianship. And different states, it can be the same thing, just different states use different terminology. In Massachusetts, for instance, a guardian is the person who makes healthcare and kind of life decisions, and a conservator would make legal and financial decisions. So you might have both, or you might have one, and they kind of correspond with a durable power of attorney and a healthcare proxy.
And then does custodianship, is that kind of the same as conservatorship?
Actually, I think conservatorship in California. So that would be, so it sounded like from what I read, conservatorship is what, at least what Jay Leno got, was like what we call guardianship in Massachusetts. So it was only over his wife's, oh no, wait, take that back. He was making financial decisions. Okay, so it is like conservatorship in Massachusetts. Right. So, and so he needed it, from what I read, to do estate planning for her. Right. And that raises a bunch of questions for me. First of all, why did they already do it?
Right.
I mean, these are wealthy people, right? And
yes, well, it's like Prince, who died, and Aretha Franklin died without wills, right?
Yeah. So that's one question. And then it can be much more complicated doing it through the courts too. First of all, everything becomes public. They might have gone to court, asked to hold things, keep them private, but generally, if you have a court proceeding, you actually have to list all the person's assets and file them in court. Mm-hmm. And then, if it's to do estate planning, at least in Massachusetts, and again, this can differ from state to state, you can't just, as conservator, write a will or write a trust. You actually have to go back to court for authorization to do that with a specific plan. And none of that is necessary if you do it ahead of time. Right.
Well, I guess that's the warning to listeners is do this early. Don't wait, right? Until the crisis or the diagnosis or whatever it happens to be. So the other big high profile case, of course, has been in the news is the Gene Hackman. And that's such an unusual one because, so my question here is, I think most people know the story that both he and his spouse died within a week of each other, but they now know she died first, and she was 20 years younger, so they probably never expected that to happen.
Right. Exactly.
And then, of course, he had Alzheimer's as well. So the question I kind of had is, his will, I guess, was written 20 years earlier, probably before his Alzheimer's diagnosis. And he named both his wife to be, his beneficiary if he was gone. And then after that, his lawyer had already passed away by this time because he was 95.
I don't think he named his lawyer as beneficiary, but as executor, right?
Yeah, or something like that. Yeah. I'm not quite sure what the details are. And then he's got adult children, and they were kind of, he wasn't really close to the. Anyway, tell us what that's all about. My question is it something where if you do have a will, but now you have a new diagnosis, maybe Alzheimer's, or, things are just changing, is it good to revisit and update that will, or does that make it seem like somebody was trying to influence you?
Well, it's an interesting question. So you should just review your plan perhaps every decade anyway, just to be safe. Because changes happen. I mean, your situation changes, your beneficiary situation change, and and along with that, what we often see is people may update their will or their trust, but then they have these beneficiary designations on old 401k plans, on old IRAs, on old life insurance policies, and they don't get those updated. Mm-hmm. So you need to review those as well on a periodic basis. The question is, you're right. What happens if you're beginning to have dementia, and that's when you update your estate plan? And I think it's questionable if you make a big change. So if you're just updating it because your lawyer retired and you have a new lawyer who's going to be the backup executor or personal representative, no one's going to question that. But if all of a sudden you're giving nothing to your adult children and everything to your new wife or husband, then you're likely going to have a challenge. So I think making big changes are what invite challenges.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with this, because I know his adult children, I think, are probably going to, make a claim against the estate or whatever. So that'll be one we'll have to watch.
Yeah,
now,
but clearly he was probably had total capacity when he did it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So it might be hard to challenge that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, a lot of us are in blended families now. I'm in a blended family. I have stepsisters and half brother and sisters and step moms and all that kind of stuff. So that can create a lot of issues sometimes. I know there's the infamous case of the radio DJ Casey Kasem. I had written about that, where his adult daughter and other adult children from his first wife were kind of in conflict with his second wife, and I mean, it became a crazy case where over the years she was like hiding him and moving him state to state, and even after he died, I know that he was buried in Norway, which was his second wife's home country, and his adult children knew he wanted to be buried, or said they knew he wanted to be buried in California, where he'd lived, almost his whole life. Talk to me about the blended families. Like, how do we approach this, and what's the best way to get everybody on the same page?
Well, you might not get everybody on the same page, so you just have to recognize that. But again, I think transparency is the most important thing. So you need to communicate, and you need to be clear about your what your wishes are. And it may not be what your kids want, but if it's clear, that helps a lot. We had a case, unfortunate case, where it was a blended family. A man and woman got together. They actually didn't get married, but they've been together for a long time. And they each had 2 kids from prior marriages. And they provided that if either of them died, everything would be held in trust for the survivor. And then we split 4 ways among the 4 kids. So it seemed like a perfectly good plan and fair, but they didn't communicate that with their kids, and the man died unexpectedly. And his kids first basically didn't want to wait because they figured it could be another 20 years. And the other thing is they had some misconceptions about the size of their dad's estate. So that was part of the lack of transparency. They thought it was much bigger than it was. And so there was a lot of suspicion that was really created in a lot of ways just by the lack that the dad didn't talk to them about this, and they didn't know, and they had these ideas in their head. And I could, to some extent, I could see why they did, because the guy liked sailing, and he had a really nice big sailboat, but that was a big part of what he owned. It wasn't like he was a rich man with a big sailboat, but I think that's what they thought he was.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, all of a sudden you find out maybe they didn't have the money that you thought, or whatever it is. Now, there's something else that I think is fascinating, and the fact that you're in Massachusetts is really interesting, because there are laws on the books, and from my understanding, you can correct me, these can date back to like the 1700s when the country was first formed, and Massachusetts is one of those states, I think, that have these familial responsibility laws.
Yeah.
And it basically kind of says, hey, you're responsible for your older loved one. And there was a case, I think, with a woman who was, had not talked to her dad in 20 years. I think there maybe had been some abuse there in her childhood or something. And he went into a nursing home, and the nursing home went after her to pay the bill. So what are those laws? I mean, do we need to know about those laws? And, what should families know about this?
So those are filial support laws. And they are on the books. I'm not familiar with this case, but in my experience, they're almost never used. I think years ago there was one in Pennsylvania that got some press, and probably they're never used because no one can get a jury to rule against the kid, like in the situation you're talking about. But they are in the books. What we see more often happens is that that the kids kind of take actions that put them in legal jeopardy. So dad goes to nursing home, the kids start cooperating with, say, the Medicaid application, and then they disappear. And now the nursing home is not getting paid by anybody. And the kid might have made some representations, or they might have signed some sort of piece of paper saying that they were going to help out. So they take these steps, or they might even sign as a guarantor. So you got to be very careful about what you commit to, and follow through if you committed to doing that. And always some of these a lot of these nursing homes ask someone to sign as responsible party, and very vague about what that means. Does it mean you're the person they're going to contact and the person who's going to give them information, or are you a guarantor? So we always tell our clients, if someone gives you a nursing home or assisted living facility, asks you to sign as responsible party, add the words responsible party and not as guarantor, to make that very clear.
So financially, you're kind of saying,
Yeah.
you can call me if something happens and dad has a heart attack, but he's going to
and
cover.
we'll help out with the Medicaid application. So if you need bank account statements and stuff like that, we'll help out with that. But
Right.
But we're not going to send you. I'm not going to send you my account. So
Right. Yeah, exactly. I want to go back. We were talking about the legal documents, and you were talking about powers of attorney and identifying your agent or your proxy for your medical decisions. Obviously HIPAA laws require that the doctor doesn't share anything that isn't, somebody who's on your record. Is it enough to just have the doctor or the hospital know, yeah, I'm the adult daughter, my mom says I'm going to make the decisions, and she's there nodding yes or whatever, and that doesn't then violate the HIPAA, or is that not enough?
it might be enough for right then, but again, the mom has to be competent.
Right.
And so it's better to have the healthcare proxy. And what we actually kind of scaffolding on this is we have our clients also sign a HIPAA release.
Okay.
And that can be useful too, because you may be in a situation where your mom is competent, but because of her treatment or something isn't able to communicate. And you need the HIPAA release to get doctors to talk to you. The other problem sometimes, a lot of this used to happen more when HIPAA was new, but sometimes doctors hide behind HIPAA. Mm-hmm. So mom goes to the emergency room, daughter shows up and tries to talk to the doctors, and they say, I can't talk to you because of HIPAA. Now, first of all, it's misreading a HIPAA. HIPAA doesn't say that the doctor can't listen to the daughter, because the daughter wants to tell. I mean, someone shows up and they can't speak or they're confused. The doctor doesn't know if that's their normal state or whether it's because something is going on, and they might have been playing tennis the day before. And so, unless they hear from the family about the situation, about what medications they're taking, they really can't treat. But they're busy, they're hassled, and they want to kind of not spend a lot. So, I mean, I don't want to say this is true of everyone, but it happens that they won't talk to anybody, and they hide behind HIPAA, and the HIPAA release can help prevent that.
Yeah, I think I've seen that too. I've worked in medical institutions where that has gone on. So you're right, though. I think now we're getting more familiar with the family caregiver being a key part of that care team, and helping to support their loved one. I have a little bit of a curveball question for you that we had not talked about before. So I don't know if you want to answer this or not, but I had an email from someone who said, I'm a little concerned that my dad isn't getting the proper care from the in-home help we have. And they have one person who's kind of like a cook and a housekeeper, and another person who comes in who does a little bit more of the personal care, bathing and, shaving and dressing and all that. And so they want to put up kind of a video cam. And he has early dementia, but they don't know if is that legal. And I know it may vary state by state. This person happens to be in California, but I heard, and you can tell me if this is wrong or not, you can record, like his apartment, but you can't record or use the sound. So in other words, you can record the video part, but you can't use any of the sound conversation part. But tell me that's a quagmire. Tell me what we should tell our listeners about that.
To be honest, I actually don't know the answer. I haven't run into that. And I think it is a state by state issue, but I know that there are often rules about the sound because the rules were written before there was the video option in effect. So there are a lot of anti-wiretap laws to protect people. So, and you have, if you're recording a telephone conversation in a lot of states, you got to inform the other person on the other side of the phone call.
Yeah. And she was just wondering, like, do I have to tell both of these helpers that there is a video camera, or can I just put it up, kind of thing? So, yeah, that's a weird one, right? I'm not
Yeah, it
sure
is.
where the laws fall, but
Mm-hmm.
certainly the concern, and I told her, I said, well, what you might want to do is just drop in unexpectedly, or see if there's any way to kind of keep an eye on things so that you can know a little bit better. But
Yeah.
anyway, um, what, there's so much you've shared with us. This is just a wealth of information, Harry, and I can't thank you enough. Is there anything else that you've come across in some of your cases which you feel is kind of important for families or family caregivers or older adults to know about?
Well, I want to mention two things. One is powers of attorney are really important, but banks and financial institutions can be a pain in the neck and not necessarily honor them.
Mm.
And so, and there are two ways to make them work better. One is renew them every 5 to 10 years, because even though there's no legal basis for this, banks and financial institutions have what I call a staleness doctrine. So if it's too old, they won't honor them, which is perverse in a lot of ways. Because if it's 10 years old, you were more likely competent than you were if you signed it 10 months ago. But somehow that's a thing. Also, a lot of financial institutions have their own power of attorney forms. So, so in addition to doing signing the general durable power of attorney, if you should contact the bank or Fidelity or Merrill Lynch or whoever you have investments with, and ask them if they have a form and fill those out as well.
Interesting. I hadn't heard that. That's a really interesting one. So there's kind of this added layer that the
Right.
financial institutions are putting in. And is that just to, get away from any kind of fraud and abuse, even
Yeah,
though there
they're
is a
worried.
legal
Yeah,
document?
they're worried they're going to be blamed, even though there's no
So they
legal basis to blame them either. But
Yeah, so they want their own paperwork. That's really
yeah,
interesting.
right.
And anything else? Any other?
Well, I mentioned, I think I might have mentioned earlier that over time I become a big proponent of revocable trusts.
Mm,
So, so in a revocable trust, you name a trustee to manage assets for you, and then you retitle the assets in the name of the trust. And normally, while you're young and competent, you're your own trustee.
right.
And but if you become incapacitated, your successor trustee can step in, or even better, when you get older, you may name a co-trustee. So if you name your children as co-trustees with you, or each child is co-trustee with you, then it's a lot easier for them to step in the event of incapacity because they're already on your accounts. But it's
Right.
not like a joint ownership on the accounts. They have no ownership interest. They're just acting as trustee, and they can
Right.
see what's going on. And if older people are real targets of scams and fraud, and this can help protect against this, or at least help somebody see what's going on because they have access to the account and step in if necessary.
And is
So
that's where you would put your home, title into the trust, right? So any
put your
big
home title,
assets, right?
but
Okay.
also your bank account and your investment account. The one thing you can't put into the trust is your retirement accounts.
Okay.
So you can name certain circumstances. You may name a trust as a beneficiary, but you can't transfer it into the trust because that becomes a taxable event.
So with those types of accounts, would it just be enough to have the beneficiary named on your account, or do you need
No, because the
something legal?
beneficiary only can step in. They only, when you name a beneficiary, saying who gets the account when you die, but they
Okay.
have no control over the account while you're alive.
So that would be the financial power of attorney then? Would
Financial
that
power
cover
of
that?
attorney or revocable trust.
Or the revocable trust? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting and that's great, valuable information. So if our listeners are now concerned and want to make sure that they've got
Yeah.
all of their T's, crossed and I's dotted, all that, where do you go about finding an elder law attorney?
Okay. First thing I always tell people is ask your friends and family and other professionals, accountants or lawyers who practice in other areas, or financial planners, because they'll know who they've worked with and is good to work with, and seems to know what they're doing and answers phone calls and isn't impatient and doesn't overcharge. So So personal knowledge is the best thing. But also, there are two sources of elder law attorneys. I mentioned the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. If you go to their website, which is NAELA, NAELA.org, they have a directory of all their members.
And we'll have that on the episode guide page. So thank you.
Okay, good. And they'll also have the people who receive certification as elder law experts. Then also there's a website called elderlawanswers.com, which, full disclosure, I founded it, but I don't have any connection to it anymore. And it has both a lot of information about what we've been talking about, a lot of consumer directed information, and a list of its members around the country. So another list of elder law attorneys.
Well, those are great resources. So thank you for that. We'll have both of those on, as I mentioned, the episode guide page. And then, Harry, if people are interested in listening to your podcast or buying your book or just finding out more, maybe they live in Massachusetts, or like, I got to get Harry on my kids. I need his help. Where can people find you?
So if you go to askharry.info, I basically just answer questions for no charge that people may have about estate planning or elder law or special needs planning there. And so you can go there, get the information. And as I said, if you have questions, post them. And then there are links there to my two books. One, you mentioned Get Your Ducks in a Row, The Baby Boomer's Guide to Estate Planning. And the other is the Baby Boomer's Guide to Trust, all about what trusts are all about and how they can be used.
Fantastic. Well, Harry, and this has just been fantastic. So much good information. And, we might have to have you back. If there's some really great breaking news out there, we're going to call you to come on and assess it for us. So thank you.
That'd be fun.
Thank you so much. Wasn't that such a great interview with Harry? So much valuable, invaluable, really, information that he shared with us. And as we mentioned, as other things happen, maybe legally in the caregiving and aging world, we'll bring him back to comment on that or whatever. Also, just wanted to tell you that we had him on this episode because May happens to be National Elder Law Month. So it's a perfect time to have Harry on. We really appreciate him making the time for us. And we're going to have the connections and contact information for Harry on our episode guide page, but also where you may be able to find an elder law attorney in any state and any county. So we'll have all that. Now let's turn to my second wonderful, fantastic interview. And this one is part of my passion project. As you guys know, I'm absolutely obsessed with things like biophilic design and well home design. And I was able to get one of my heroes, who is Linda Kafka. And she is the founder and principal of the Neuro Design Academy. And so this is both an in-person and online courses that professionals take. So people who are in interior design or architecture or building or even real estate agents can take these courses that are taught by experts, particularly in neuroscience. And it's all about, how do we use neuroscience now, neurodesign, to bring about environments that create better health, happiness, wellness for us. So this is all what I love. It's actually going to be part of my the snug home. But Linda's mantra is about being guided by science and shaped by emotion and how our brains work. And she's going to talk about, there's some serious science, folks. This is not all just, woohoo wellness stuff. She really gets into the research behind all of this. And, her courses are just fantastic. So, as you know, this is, I think, going to be now the next trend. It's not a trend. I don't even want to say it's a trend. This is the next evolution of how we're going to look at our homes and how employers are going to look at their offices and bring about environments that really speak to that undercore of wellness, of health, of happiness, which is so critical overall to our longevity. So with that, here's my interview with Linda Kafka of the Neuro Design Academy. Well, I am really thrilled to have my very special guest on this episode, who is Linda Kafka, who is the founder of the Neuro Design Academy. We're going to learn all about that. And this is just a topic that I am so passionate about. So this is going to be really fun for me. And I know that you, as our audience, are going to really enjoy this. So Linda, welcome to Caregiving Club on Air.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and to chat with you today. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, the first question we always ask our guests are, where are we talking to you from today?
Well, I'm coming in from Toronto, Canada. Actually, I have to be a little bit more honest than that. Toronto's the biggest city, but I'm about 2 hours outside of the big city, and I live in a small little fishing village right on Lake Erie. So, if for those of you that are calling in, or your viewers that are international, I'm on one of the 5 Great Lakes. So,
Sounds beautiful. It sounds
thank you.
idyllic, actually. Well, Linda, as I said, I have really been wanting to get you on this podcast because I am so fascinated and really see this as the future of our health and what caregivers need to know. But this whole movement in neurodesign seems to be getting a lot more attention, of course, these days. Tell us a little bit about how you define neurodesign and what is the mission and what the Neuro Design Academy offers.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Because, I just to kind of give you a bit of context to it, back in the 70s, when I was, going through high school and deciding, what career path I wanted, I was the only girl that was enrolled in building construction, architectural drafting, and architectural design. I kind of, even though I did home economics, back in those days we called that, I kind of gravitated to the construction part of learning because I was really fascinated on buildings, and how they were erected, and the fact that they were so intriguing in terms of, um, being perfectly straight or whatever. My dad was a contractor, and sadly, my guidance counselor said back in those days, this is really not a profession for you in Toronto, in Canada. It's predominantly male oriented. Back in the 70s, you were going to end up being more of a secretary. So I ended up, based on my guidance counselor, to go into the field of marketing. And marketing really opened this up. I mean, we talked about subliminal advertising. We talked about the non-conscious and how to, you know, really guide or direct consumers into purchasing one brand versus another. So that whole psychology and understanding has certainly proven beneficial to me because I found myself in the interior design industry in 2006, and this has kind of come full circle for me. So the whole idea, the premise of neurodesign lives in marketing, but if we're designing for human beings, we have to understand human genetics. We have to understand what triggers us. We have to understand why certain environments, excite us or don't, or environments that make us feel safe or don't. And so neurodesign is kind of that umbrella of understanding the way our body, our nervous system, and our brain responds to design elements. So it doesn't matter if it's a design element like my background,
Mhm.
or a website, or a package, potato chips, or what an interior designer or design professional does in the space. It's always about the design elements and how people respond. So what we're doing at the Neuro Design Academy, and part of our mission is to bring this information forward globally because it's not taught in interior design school or architecture. So it's kind of that merging of the idea of marketing and how we work with humans and how we respond to design elements and how we respond to humans, and bringing it into the interior design. Have I explained that right?
You have, and I
Does
have
it
to
make
tell you, I
sense?
feel I feel so like kind of connected to you because my early background is in marketing as well. So all of that kind of psychology, of influence and incentivizing people and everything is really something that resounds with me. But as I became a gerontologist and really understanding how our environments really can affect
Yeah,
how we feel, it can help with our
absolutely.
stress and all these issues that the mental health issues and some of the other things that we're seeing, and they're also they can be healing spaces. And I think
So
that's where
true.
we're looking now into the future is how do we understand better our environments? And that's really what you're kind of leading on this movement. One of the things that I thought was really fascinating is that this isn't just about wellness, which I know everything is wellness these days, right? The big wellness movement is here, but it's not just, it's science backed. When you are using research, you call it design genetics and the human biology aspect, and you kind of touched on that. But I was fascinated by some of the stuff I read from the academy on facial analysis and even galvanic. I think
Galvanic
I'm saying that.
skin
Yeah, galvanics
response.
and skin. The skin reaction to an environment. So tell me a little bit about that, because now this sounds like, wow, there is a lot of intense science that's behind all of these designs.
There's the human science, understanding humans, human biology. If I can kind of just preface that a little bit, we evolved, our brains are sculpted by nature. We evolved from nature. If you want to look at, and I think for your viewers, look at a 24-hour clock to really understand evolution and our time period in nature versus the built environment. If you look at that, it would be fair to say that we have spent 23 hours and 59 minutes in the natural environment and only 1 minute in what we call the built environment, in the box that we live in. And so these technologies that were typically available for the marketing industry, that we would use, so for instance, eye tracking, facial expression analysis, galvanic skin response, EEG, those would be those caps with the wires coming off of them, heart rate devices, they all measure the physiological effects of our body, and then also where we're seeing and viewing things. And so these devices, these modalities, we call them, were available and still are in the marketing world. We use them for advertising campaigns, we use them for packaging, we use them for layout designs, all kinds of things. It's only just in the last several years that it's kind of come into the architect world. So we have the ability now to be able to use eye tracking glasses, or let's say facial expression analysis, if I use just those two, to look at renderings, to look at concepts, to look at existing spaces, and kind of measure how people are viewing those environments, or how they, or their non-conscious, kind of before it comes to their conscious, how they're reacting. So are they smiling? Are they looking confused? Are they looking angry? And it gives us a lot more intel into how we can adjust those designs based on the individuals or the people that are going to be using those spaces.
And I think I can kind of observe that in a lot of the new building designs. Office buildings, restaurants, hotels seem to be really embracing some of this. But do you see this also coming into like residential homes? And
there, it's already
okay.
there. It's already there. And why I say that is because these modalities are easier to not just acquire financially, to be able to have access to them, but because they're giving you real data, real information. And so if you are a designer that specializes in health and well-being, and you really want to serve your clients, having these extra tools in your toolbox are going to give you better understanding of your clients and how they respond to the space. And
Absolutely.
they are valuable tools that we never used in the interior design industry, but we're using them today.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating that you use the clock kind of visual for people to really understand how influential and how important nature is. I've written about and talked about living out on that African savanna 2 to 3 million years ago, and our brains are still, aligned with that and are soothed and calmed by those types of environments, despite the fact we've spent 95% of our time indoors now and not in nature. But let's move into that, because this whole area of biophilic design, and just for our listeners who know a little bit about this, the term biophilic design, I know, was coined by E.O. Wilson, a Harvard researcher back in, I think, the 80s, but it's really been around forever. I mean, Olmsted used it in Central Park design and, some other things. So tell us, though, a little bit about biophilic design in the home.
It's growing hugely in popularity. And, and like I said earlier, our brains were sculpted from nature. We spent our time in nature. We find our happy place in nature. And so that whole idea of biophilic design and coming into our homes probably originated more in the commercial, the workplace. It was really implemented there first. Why? Because, they had the funding to be able to create environments that would, really improve your productivity, your creativity, reduce absenteeism. So at the end of the day, it was really financially driven by a lot of companies to incorporate this in, because they saw an economic value to biophilic design. There's a lot of research and studies out there that demonstrate that. Even in the retail environment, incorporating biophilic elements into retail design, research, not me, but research has identified that it actually increases sales by 25%. So it started more in that type of environment, in hospital environment, research that was being done in the 80s, referencing, views to nature, views versus views to brick wall. But it has found its way into the home. And why not? Because at the end of the day, we're all human, whether we're in a workplace, in a hospital, in a spa, in a shopping mall, in our homes. These are the buildings that we occupy. And so it's really important to, also look at it from our residential perspective and what we can do within that space. So we're seeing that in design now, furniture design, the colors that are coming in, the elements, the layouts, it's all kind of referencing that connection to nature and creating a better environment for people.
And one of the things that I think is really kind of fun, if you will, about the design part of this is I've looked at all different kinds of genres of design, right? So traditional or eclectic or modern or mid-century or whatever.
Yeah.
And you really can incorporate biophilic design into any of those types of styles, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You've got, and so what you're looking at, you've studied and understand biophilic design, but for your audience and your listeners, they may not have. And so there are principles and concepts. We look at the nature of the space. We look at nature, in the space. So what are we using it for, or the nature in the space? We also look at natural analogs. And so this is where I'm going with in terms of furniture. So as human beings, we didn't evolve out of a right angle environment. Much of what we came out of nature was very curved and rounded and, like the shapes of your body. So look at the sofa behind me here and look at the shapes of it. So you're looking at those natural analogs, those shapes that come from nature, or elements like um, prospect and refuge that would fall under the nature, or the nature in space. So think of yourself walking down a forest path, and it's bending, and the curiosity of a human to say, oh, I wonder what's around that corner. Your guard is up a little bit because you're thinking, is there danger, or is it safe? Like the curiosity. And you can achieve that too in your own home as we go around corners in our homes, or look at risk and peril. The staircase right behind me, oops, on this side over here. That's an element of risk and peril. And so, things that we would find as human beings in nature. So we're seeing that happening within the space, and there's physiological effects that our body undergoes when we have these environments around, and built into our space. So it's becoming more and more important because we're not designing spaces based on trend anymore. We're designing them for the humans that occupy them.
Right, which is really where it should have always been, but it's great to see it finally coming around that way. But I love that you pointed out your background for any of our listeners. If you're not watching this on YouTube, which you can see the video version of this interview. Yeah, the curved couch and it's softer. And when we think about our older loved ones at home, those types of elements again become, I mean, it's essential for all of us at any age, right? It's a very ageless design. But I think as we get older, we forget about, bumps and bruises. And so things that have curves that are softer, the nature kind of, it helps us feel like we're still thriving, even though you might be getting older. Those are all really important elements. But talk to us a little bit about, because the whole, neurodivergence and then going into things like dementia and Alzheimer's, there's just so many, we were talking earlier, there's so many different types of dementia. There's so many different types of neurodivergence. Yeah. And so when it comes to neurodesign, how do you apply that depending on maybe what you're looking at with your loved one who, needs this in terms of helping to soothe and calm? How do you approach that?
I'm really glad you're asking that question, because as somebody that's an educator in the industry, and I've certainly I wrote the training manual for the Canadian Home Builders Association for aging in place, or what I like to call living in place, is adaptive.
Yes, I love that. I love that a lot better.
But, it's not about aging, because everyone really benefits. However, what's really important when you're designing for clients that are neurodivergent, people that might have autism, people that might have trauma, because we all to some degree have trauma, and one person's trauma is no no bigger or lesser than the next person's trauma. When we're looking at aging and how, our bodies change, our cognition changes, our sensory changes, and so on, it's somebody that has dementia, specifically maybe Alzheimer's, Lewy body, vascular dementia. Every one of these is going to be a little bit different, and depending on the individual, it's going to inflict that individual differently too. And so when you're designing or having a client, or maybe it's even your own home, and you're the homeowner and your loved one is suffering from one of these progressive conditions, it's really important, and I want to emphasize this, to align yourself with somebody that has a better understanding of the condition itself. What I mean by that is you're connecting with somebody that's a gerontologist who studies and understands this. You're dealing with somebody or having somebody on your team that's an occupational therapist. You're perhaps maybe aligning yourself with or connecting with organizations like the Alzheimer's Association or the Autism Association. Why? Because you're going to get a better understanding of the individual, the condition that they're dealing with, not just in the moment, but how it's going to progress and change. And having that knowledge is going to help you design that environment much better. So easy for me to say, hey, do this tip. And if you have dementia, you should do this, 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 and this. But depending on that individual's dementia and how far they're progressed, the tips I give you might not necessarily be accurate. There are some general things you do need to know. Like, for instance, lighting. We know through dementia that people that have dementia, there can be a high sensitivity to glare. Your eyes are aging. We start to notice our eyes aging at the age of 40, and they potentially progressively can get worse. In dementia, we've lost a lot of cognition. Our brain cells are basically dying off. And so having a better understanding of the spaces, lighting, for instance, can cause a lot of glare. It can cause confusion. It can cause you to be upset. If lighting's done right, it can actually lift your mood and improve that. So what type of lighting does that individual need? You're going to have to really pull back a few layers and understand that dementia and how far that person's progressed in order to really make better recommendations. So it's a tough question in one respect if you try to go it alone, but aligning yourself with somebody that has knowledge of the human body, how we age, our progressive conditions, our different emotional and mental challenges that we might be facing. Having an expert on your team or advising is really going to help you in that matter.
And I think that's helpful for our listeners because it is a lot of information, and there is certainly an expertise here. I'm thinking, okay, I'm a little lost, but having that expert is so critical. And you mentioned lighting, and I do a lot of work in the dementia community, and so you might have a loved one who has been diagnosed maybe in an early stage, but we know by mid stage about 60% of those with Alzheimer's will possibly have sundowning episodes at dusk where, the change in lighting of the day can cause a lot of confusion and panic and agitation and all that. So just knowing that you have someone who is understanding that and helping you design properly, we've seen a lot of work now with light therapy lamps and other things, is so critical. Do
Yeah,
you see? Yeah.
you can't go it alone.
Yeah.
I meet a lot of people that will tell me, especially in the interior design industry, that they've had a parent that has dementia or they've got a child that has autism and so on. And so they've got that lived experience. But that doesn't you can't just carte blanche design a space based on just that personal experience you had with that individual. So you really have to have an open mind to really expect that you're going to need to do some research and to do some more studying and to really understand that individual. There's a foundational knowledge that we all have, but that extra knowledge is going to make a difference between the quality of life for that individual or not.
Right.
It's
So how do
important.
you see this all coming together? Give us a sense, first of all, do you see a lot of architects but especially interior designers starting to partner up with people like gerontologists like myself or occupational therapists? Do you see more of that these days? And then how does someone who has a loved one with that diagnosis even understand how important the environment is and that they need to talk to an expert? So those are two kind of different questions, but
Two
yeah.
really, really, really good questions. I think, in interior design, we're seeing a global shift. We're seeing a global shift. Not to keep going back to what happened during the pandemic, but it certainly has helped move the profession of interior design and architecture forward. We're seeing a global shift. We have organizations that have been formed, not for profits, around neuroarchitecture, really understanding how buildings influence, um, you know, um, cities and people that occupy those. We're also looking at, the interior part, and we're seeing more and more designers showing an interest in what's happening within the spaces. So it's definitely happening out there. It hasn't hit its peak yet. We don't have a lot of programming out there in terms of schooling on how to school an interior designer on neurodesign or neuroscience or human genetics. It's not actually even really taught to a great degree in architecture or interior design school. So that shift is happening. But at the same time, what we're seeing is that the homeowners, and I specifically work in residential, we're seeing that there is a need for this knowledge and this information. And so people are asking the questions. So it's happening from both sides, where we're seeing, a movement happening in the architectural design industry towards this, and the consumers showing an interest, that they want this. And I think also there's a greater acceptance of people with disabilities, um, a greater understanding that not there are a lot of invisible disabilities, and these
Yeah.
can happen at any point. You could be born that way. God forbid you could have an accident and become, disabled, with whether it's the body or the mind. There's lots of different things that are happening, and I think at the end of the day, design isn't about creating that perfect space for that perfect human being. It's about dealing with the unique individual challenges that every individual that's going to visit, occupy, live in that space, um, has to be addressed. So you might have parents that are atypical, but you might have a child that has autism, or maybe suffers from something else, or an elderly parent that's living with you that's got dementia. How do we create that environment for everybody? And so that movement of wanting to know how to improve the quality of life is not just in its early stages. It's already out there. It's out there. And the problem we've got is the education. Educate
Yeah.
more on this. And that's
My
the
hope is that the healthcare professionals, whether it's physicians or whomever, and even if you go through a certification like a CAP certification for
which I've done.
ADA and universal design, this should be
I've
part of
done.
it, right? It shouldn't be separate. There should be now a comprehensive neuro design plus your universal design. I want to just touch quickly because I know we have some listeners who are from the employer side, HR, folks and stuff. And I'm curious about your comments as it applies to also our offices. Now, a lot of people are going back into office environments since the pandemic and all that. But do you feel that a lot of employers understand this, and have they already embraced this, or where is that movement?
The bigger companies have, the big companies have it. What ended up happening when a lot of people had the opportunity to work from home, it was really hard to get people to come back, obviously, to the office. When I created and ran Canada's only design center back in 2009 till 2018. And I remember us having to move our offices within the design center. Every time there was, we'd have an empty showroom, we'd occupy it as our office. But then if we had somebody potentially interested in leasing it, we would, vacate it and find the next one. And I remember the really poor lighting conditions, the poor indoor air quality, the no views outside. There were no windows in this environment. There was about 250,000 square feet, and there were about 40 showrooms. And I remember distinctly the staff complaining of headaches around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, we would just be dragging ourselves. And so, of course, this became really, important to us as we worked in that space to find environments that were going to allow us to thrive. But what's happening is that same experience I've had, many, many other people are experiencing out there in the workforce. And so if you want people to come back to the workplace that you have a lease on, or you own the building and it's a huge expense, you've got to create environments that are going to be more in tune with that individual, and to allow them to thrive, and to create environments in there that are going to support them and their productivity and creativity and their social engagement within the company. And I think all of these play such an important role. So what I can tell you is that the biophilic design has really been adopted in a lot of workplace environments now. It's almost like part of the HR package. We've got dental benefits, we've got all these glasses, we've got insurance. We meet your what do you call that, pension contributions and so on.
Right.
Now it's becoming part of the HR benefits that we're offering potential employees. Come work for our company, because this is what we also do. We create environments that are also help you thrive. And so look at what Google does with their employees, what Apple does. Oh my God, I had the chance to go to Seattle to go into the spheres that they have there.
Spheres. Yeah.
In
Yeah.
those spheres, and I did not know this, but those individuals are allowed to go and work in those biophilic spheres that have thousands of plants within
Yeah.
them. And so, we're seeing more and more of that happening, where Etsy, for instance, creating conference, rooms that look like treetops and things like that.
Yeah.
We're seeing those things happening out there in the office world. And yeah, you know what? It's a big expense for a small company, but there are elements that you can incorporate that are not going to cost a lot of money, that can still make you feel human within those spaces.
But even some of the urban designers, like I know Highline in New York is along the
Oh,
old railroad track,
oh,
and
it's beautiful
several of
there.
the buildings. Yeah, it's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
Well, I could talk to you all day long. I mean, this is, like I said, I'm so passionate about this. I just
We
think
haven't
it's
even
really wonderful.
scratched. Oh
We
my God, we
haven't.
haven't even scratched it. What I can tell you is that design, much like the tagline about above my head here, the future of design is science-backed and emotionally driven. We were always taught form follows feeling. I'm sorry, form follows function is what I meant to say. And that makes sense. We want to be able to function in a space. We want to be able to keep the individual safe within this space. So we have to really look at, how we function in that space. And that's what the CAPS and the adaptive and the aging in place programming taught me is, how we vertically, horizontally move our bodies up and down and so on. The well building standards taught me about my 11 body systems and how my respiratory, my endocrine, my skin, my digestive system, all of this responds to the environment. Is the indoor air quality good? Are the acoustics? And now we're finally at a place where we're looking at emotion. So form follows feeling. How do I feel in this space? Because you can tick off all the boxes, but if I don't feel good in that space, I'm always going to be in a heightened cortisol. I'm never going to get that dopamine rush, like that whole
Yeah.
dopamine decor, and really
Yeah.
get excited and rewarded through the visual elements within that space. And that's what we want. We want to feel good in our spaces,
We
not just
do.
be able to function in them well.
Linda, this has just been fascinating, and I think our listeners are getting so much out of this. We're going to have you back, though.
Yeah,
We'll come
come
up
back.
with some more topics that you can share with us, because this is so fascinating. But tell us where our listeners can learn more about you and about the Neuro Design Academy.
Thank you. So if you go to neurodesignacademy.com, just like it sounds, it's right up there on the screen, neurodesignacademy.com. You'll learn more about what I'm doing and what we're doing. We do have programming that's available. For right now, it's really focused more on the trades. That's where I educate. I try to educate the interior designers, the builders, the architects, the designers, the ones that are responsible for creating the spaces for homeowners. But it never hurts a homeowner to also learn about this, so that they too, or HR or any of these individuals, so they have a better understanding of what should be within that space, what's going to make them thrive or help their family.
So, Linda, I know we could talk about this all day long. This is so fascinating, and we're going to definitely have you back to talk about other topics, that are in this area. But are there any other insights or anything we didn't cover that you feel is important for the audience to know about neurodesign?
I think so. You know what? There are a lot of there's a lot of references out there, but I think that what you want to do, one of the tips, or some of the tips I'd like to really leave with your audience, is really identify spaces in your home that you think that need to be improved. For instance, I talk a lot to interior designers about creating a sleep sanctuary. In order to really create a sleep sanctuary, you have to have a little bit of better understanding of why we need to sleep. And when I hear executives say to me, "Oh, I only need 4 hours a night. That's all I, sleep, and I'm up at 4 o'clock before everybody else, and I'm raring to go." Guess what? You're actually doing your body a disservice, because we need that time to sleep to clean the plaque out. We know that plaque leads to dementia and all these different kinds of things. So some of the tips I want to share or leave with you is look at your space through a different lens. Look at spaces and what you're doing within that space. If you're looking to, a kitchen where it's communal is going to have a different need than a bedroom where you need your privacy, or a bathroom where it's more private. And so there's a lot of references and information out there. There's books like Why We Sleep and help you understand that. So what I'd like to suggest is don't just look at the design elements, have a better understanding of how you need to use that space. If you need to find that environment within your home to help you decompress, digitally detox, get away from all of these systems. Look at spaces that you can create within your own environment. You can have a designer do that for you, or you can create it your own self. But look through a different lens when you're looking at the need of that space and how
Yeah.
it can actually help your family thrive.
And I
So
love
I want
that
you to look at
because
that.
because I think that, we do often forget. It's like we're focused on, oh, I want this beautiful new color, or there's this new wallpaper, or whatever it is. And we're
Yeah.
not thinking so much about what are we supposed to be doing in this particular space. I often think too about what are the five senses when you walk into a room.
Yeah.
What do you see? What do you smell? What can you touch? It
Sensory
calms
design
you or
is
soothes you.
huge. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
huge. Yeah. But you know what? To your point, like I hate doing laundry. Oh my God. I
We-
love to iron. Oh my God. I love ironing because it calms my
Oh,
mind.
I'm the opposite. I'll do your laundry if you iron for me.
So what I need in my laundry room is I need things that are going to excite me beyond the standard. So, I'm a neurodivergent individual. My space, because I'm all over shiny penny kind of person, as you probably can tell, I need an environment that's going to hug me and ground me and hold me. So I need my environments to be more muted and dark tones. But I really love the colors of bright fuchsia and all this. Guess where I'm putting that? I'm going to put that in my laundry room to motivate me and get me excited to get in there to sort my laundry and to wash it, and more importantly to dry it and then put it away.
Love that.
That's an example of something that you could do to increase your motivation. Or if you're working from home, you need to create an environment that allows you to focus. And it doesn't have to be a whole room. It could just be an area that allows you to focus. So, what does that look like? So those are kind of tips that I'd like to, just share with your audience.
Yeah, and I think, you had mentioned a couple questions back about obviously, the brain and neurosciences behind a lot of this. I'm going through my own personal. I'm doing my Swedish death cleaning right now because I tend to be a clutter freak. And, it's like I've got piles of things everywhere. And to other people, it probably looks like, oh my goodness. But, I know what it's in each pile. But I'm starting to get into, I just want it out. I just want it clutter free. And I think, again, that goes back to what you were saying about you want curves. You want to be able to look around the corner. That clutter really can create a lot of stress that we don't realize.
It does. It increases your stress levels. But you know what the problem is our brains can't make sense of it. And so we need organized complexity. So you can have that clutter. You just need to organize it. So you can organize it by having those, baskets on open shelves and so on. My personality type needs to have one room, only one room in the house where it can have clutter in it. I have to be careful because my husband's more OCD. If he doesn't use something in a couple of weeks, he'll throw it out. Like I'm talking kitchen gadgets, and I'm like, what do like, come on, this is costing us a fortune. He needs everything organized. So respecting that, my office is my sanctuary. I and my neurodivergent personality need to see things because they trigger stories for me.
Yeah.
They trigger emotions for me. They take me to a time or give me a reminder. If that's all put away, I start to have a meltdown because I can't connect with things. And so it's a balance. Our brains need organized complexity. Think of nature. There's a lot of organized complexity in nature. And so we need to be able to reduce that clutter to our liking. So my husband would be so happy to get rid of every book, every piece that I have in my office, and just devoid it of clutter. Having too much clutter obviously is negative. Having nothing, it can be a negative impact. So you need that balance in there. And your brains respond to, the stimuli that you have within your spaces.
Yeah. And again, I think it's like stress, which often is invisible. We don't realize what's going on inside our body when we feel anxious and all these other issues. But it's similar. Our environments, I don't think we've really fully understood how our environments affect our mental health and our physical health.
Researchers are still looking into this. If you look at researchers like Anjan Chatterjee from he's out of University of Pennsylvania, and he's world renowned on this. He talks about this and really brings a lot of that research forward. The science world has been studying the built environment for over 30 years. We're just catching up to it now. And in all fairness, it's really sometimes hard to read and digest a lot of these research white papers and try to apply it to interior design. So they've kind of always worked in silos, but now we seem to be bridging that gap. And that's what I'm doing. I'm bridging the gap from the neuroscientists that are really like, it's heavy duty information, like it's heavy information to digest and understand. And I'm bringing it to interior designer because interior designers, design professionals, whatever path you've chosen, you have a greater opportunity to impact occupant health and well-being. I'm not saying you're curing anything. I'm just saying you have a greater impact to improve the quality of our life by designing spaces, by having a better understanding of who we are as human beings.
Yeah. And also just, again, health is kind of integrated into everything now, right? I mean, we see it as parts of everything that we do or places we go or whatever. So it's an exciting time.
Really
I
is.
love seeing this happening. Yeah, exactly. So
you'll see more and more. You'll see more and more of this coming out. I just want to preface the fact that the wellness real estate back pre-COVID was probably in and around $300 billion. It's now closer to 500 billion. What we're seeing is condos, homes, resorts, everybody focusing on, how do we incorporate the health and well-being into a space?
Yeah.
That is not the future. That is already now today. There's a lot of money. Your real estate, your own real estate, if you do aging in place design or living in place design, you think about that, you add in an element of health and well-being through biophilic design or through neuro design, your real estate value, without question, will go up, creating environments that are much healthier. So we're seeing that happening out there a lot now.
I love it. I'm excited. And I feel like, yeah, exactly. I feel like, okay, I've kind of jumped on this bandwagon early. This is good. Or maybe not early, but at least in the middle.
Good time. It all came when it was supposed to happen,
Right.
Design isn't just about picking color of the year or picking latest trends. It's about designing for me. It's my space. I'm investing in it. How are you creating an environment that I'm going to thrive? And I don't want to be copying what I'm seeing on design trends out there. Make it about me.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's such a great, again, that really is a great message to the audience is that, yeah, there's trends out there, this, that, whatever, but it's what makes you happy. It's what makes you feel comforted or the loved one that you're helping, to design for.
If you need to have things around you to remind you, to tell stories, that's okay. If you need a completely, organized environment, that's okay. But you need to know, what really is important to that person to help them thrive and to help them be well within that space. So that's the questions we're asking. What's it going to take to make you feel excited, connected, well, happy? Let's get those neurotransmitters, the dopamine, the serotonin, even the oxytocin flowing. So let's be happy in our spaces.
Yeah. And I love that. Dopamine design. I'm going to use that.
Yeah. It's out there. It's out there. I'm going to be
I love it.
Future markets, but
yeah, for sure. Well, again, Linda, this has just been fascinating and we will definitely have you back for more. But in the meantime, where can our listeners learn more about you and also the Neuro Design Academy?
Yep. So neurodesignacademy.com is our platform. It's an educational platform. We have programming right now out there. It is a more of the science, the foundational. It's the science of design. So you can take that course, but we do have programming right now that in the very near future will be up on the site. So we're working with sensory design specialists that will do programming. We've got a neuroaesthetics certification course. We've got lighting, sleep. So we're going to see more and more programming coming out in the very near future. But that's where you'll find me, neurodesignacademy.com.
Oh, wonderful. And we will be following you and everything you're doing. So, Linda, thanks again for being on the podcast. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you for having me. And, I look forward to having more conversations because there's so many things we can unpack under this umbrella.
Absolutely. Take care.
Thank you.
Wasn't that just a great interview with Linda? She's somebody who just is so joyful and who makes you really just embrace this whole concept around this whole neurodesign. And, I'm such a fan of hers because she's really elevating the space, elevating, the role of people who create design, whether it's our home or our offices. But also, she's embracing the partnerships with other experts like gerontologists out there, like myself, to bring them into the mix because we all know that as we live longer, we've got to focus more on these things and make it work for us. So I really appreciate that fact. We're seeing it in financial services, and now we're seeing it in interior design and building design and all that. And Linda's one of the leading heroes of that movement. So thanks again for her time to talk to us. Now we want to delve in quickly to Well Home Design. And again, I've just got a couple quick things to share with you because I know this is a longer episode, but May is Home Improvement Month. And there are two resources that I wanted to highlight for you that are really great for older adults and for family caregivers. So the first one is, as we get older, and let me tell you, this is a personal thing for me because I'm a solo ager. I live alone and I am getting older. And, having a good handyman is one of the best things. Like they always say, you need a good doctor, you need a good lawyer, you need a good accountant. Well, I would put handyman on that list because let me tell you, getting up on ladders, not certainly safe. And, you get dizzier. I'm not quite as strong. I have to admit it. I'm not quite as strong as I used to be. So having someone that can come into the home that you trust, but also now, again, that added element, somebody who's actually trained to make maybe certain modifications or help out people who are older is great. So I know there's a lot of handymen out there who have their own shingles hanging out there, and I say shout out to them. They're great. But here's one if you're looking for somebody, and I am actually going to use them. And then I will report back to you, but I'm sure they will be wonderful because they get really high ratings. And it's called TruBlue Home Service Ally. And again, these are, handymen and people that can come in and make small modifications in your home. Maybe put in some grab bars or, maybe put in, roll out cabinets and shelves and things like that. And do it right. And so they really have focused on that older adult population. So TruBlue Home Service Ally, going to have a link to them. And then I have a lot of people reaching out to me these days, which is kind of cool. It means somebody's listening out there. But I had a company reach out called Life Valet. So I went and checked them out. Okay, I'm in love. Can I tell you? They have amazing, beautiful grab bars. Now, I know we think of grab bars, it screams older. No way, Jose. Let me just tell you, these grab bars are lovely. And I'm thinking about redoing my bathroom. So, of course, I'm making my little list. And these guys are really terrific. And obviously, again, they specialize in making sure that those grab bars are going to be sturdy enough so it can hold you if you are falling and you happen to grab onto it. But it's gorgeous stuff. Let me tell you, it is. These aren't your grandma's grab bars, okay? So I'm going to have a link to them, Life Valet. You can check them out, and you can be sure that we're going to have them on our holiday gift guide this year. And then May is also National Moving Month. So maybe your loved one is downsizing and moving into a smaller place. Maybe they're moving to a senior living community or assisted living or even memory care. And you've got to help them downsize as a family caregiver. So what are the resources out there? Well, there's a really great one called Porch. So porch.com. And actually, a couple of years ago, I did a guest article for them about downsizing for older adults and what caregivers need to consider. And they're a really great resource for moving and downsizing that, again, is specialized in older adults. They understand, the issues. They understand what the needs are. They know that caregivers need help. So it's kind of nice that a lot of these services are not just generic anymore. We have specialized services now that really can help us out as family caregivers and with our older loved ones. So porch.com, another great one to check out. And then I mentioned to you, we've got a bonus for you this episode on our pop culture, stuff that we do. And aging is becoming cool. At least that's the takeaway I have from Martin Sheen and Bradley Cooper and Seth and Lauren Miller Rogen, all of whom are involved in new documentaries and films that are dedicated to aging, Alzheimer's, caregiving. So we're going to have little links and clips on our episode guide page to all of these. But just really quickly, there's a new PBS documentary called Aging in America, Survive or Thrive. Again, it's on PBS, hosted and narrated by Martin Sheen, actor Martin Sheen from, remember him? He was the president on The West Wing. And then there is the big caregiving documentary, and everyone's so excited about this because Bradley Cooper got involved. He was a caregiver to his dad who had cancer and went through the experience that we all do, the roller coaster of emotions and lack of healthcare coordination and all the fragmentation that you face. And so he got behind producing this documentary on caregiving. And I was actually on a panel discussion with Tom Chiatto, who's one of the producers for PBS, who worked on this documentary. And we were on a panel discussion that was hosted by Comfort Keepers, and it was a really great day. I'm going to see if maybe we can get Tom to come on. I don't know if we'll get Bradley. Listen, we'll try. But maybe we'll have Tom come on and talk a little bit about the documentary because I think it starts streaming in late May, but it actually will appear on PBS. It'll be broadcast nationally on PBS in late June. So we'll make sure that we get you all that information. And then I just want to do a shout out to Seth and Lauren Miller Rogen. They were recently honored on the Time 100 list, and what a great honor it was, and so well deserved. I have to say, they have done so much with their charity, Hilarity for Charity, which is dedicated to the caregivers of those who have loved ones with Alzheimer's, as Lauren's family does. And you'll also see her story in a new documentary that's out from James Keach, who did the documentary on Glenn Campbell. He also did the Oscar-winning film about Johnny Cash and June Carter Cash that starred Reese Witherspoon and Joaquin Phoenix. Anyway, great director. He directed this new documentary for the story of Lauren and Seth and her mom, who had early onset Alzheimer's, and it's called Taking Care. And you can stream that right now on Amazon and Apple TV. I'm actually using it in my workshops. I'm telling people to go take a look at this. Using a couple clips from it so that people can really understand what Alzheimer's caregiving is all about. And also what a great guy Seth Rogen is. Let me tell you. I mean, Lauren is a hero in my mind, but Seth, you're up there, man. You're a hero too. He was a good boyfriend and certainly a good husband. But anyway, I'm honored to work with Hilarity for Charity and Jasmine and all the great people over there. They recently had me do a workshop during their CareCon event this year, and it was called How to Find Joy in Dementia. So I really hope that you get a chance to listen to that workshop. I'm going to have a link to it on the episode guide page. And again, just a shout out to our friends at Hilarity for Charity and all the great work that they're doing. And, I love being involved with them. So check it out. Thank you for joining us on this episode. A reminder, you can find more information in my book, Me Time Monday, The Weekly Wellness Plan to Find Balance and Joy for a Busy Life, or visit MeTimeMonday.com or CaregivingClub.com. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Caregiving Club on Air. Please hit the subscribe button. To listen to us on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, SiriusXM, iHeartRadio, Pandora, as well as other listening channels. Check out all the resources and article links on our episode guide page at caregivingclub.com. Just hit the podcast tab at the top and email us with comments and questions at podcast@caregivingclub.com. Thank you again for listening, and take care and stay well.